This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Have you ever thought what it might be like to be squashed flat by a pancake? It's Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books, and sometimes children's books, and sometimes very loosely based on, I'm going to go out on a limb and take a little stab in the dark here. Before we get started on this week's episode, we announced in our prequel episode, and we want to give a reminder here in our main episode, which we tend to have more listeners in, which makes sense. I get it. I don't listen to all the prequel episodes of all the podcasts I listen to, so I get it. We have a Patreon now. If you visit our Patreon, you can support us. We announced the levels in the prequel episode. They're actually slightly cheaper. We adjusted them than before they even went live, really, technically. So there's one. The first level is $2. That gives you early access and ad free if we ever do have ads on the show. Right now we don't, but you get it early access the night before. So this episode I will be publishing in the Patreon RSS feed when I get done getting it edited Tuesday night. Normally the episode would come out Wednesday morning. We've kind of shifted. Also, spoilers. We've kind of been shifting our production schedule to Wednesdays instead of Tuesdays. That's the $2 level. At the $5 level, you get all that per month. You get all that stuff, plus bonus content, which right now, the first thing we put out was a discussion on the first couple episodes of The Mandalorian and the first half of the first season of Dollface on Hulu. We're going to see Knives Out tomorrow night. We're going to probably record a discussion of that, which will be some bonus content. Certain big movies like Rise of Skywalker and stuff we'll still put out in the main feed. Mm-hmm. Anything that's like, or if it's like a relevant... like the Crimes of Grindelwald episode, that even if we had Patreon at that time, I think we probably would have put that in the main feed. But some of the other stuff, like Knives Out, other discussion stuff, we'll put in the patron-only feed. So yeah, and that's at the $5 level, plus all the stuff at the $2 level. And then in our $15 per month level, which is our Hall of Fame, we'll come up with a better name for it, which we have one person in right now. Alina, I believe is their name. Shout out to Alina. You're amazing. You get all of that other stuff. Plus, you get suggestions. What was it? Priority suggestions for people that are at that level. We will put their suggestions at the front of the queue. And probably that number will stay reasonably low, so it'll be relatively easy to put those people's suggestions first. And you get a shout out in every prequel episode. Everybody else at the $5 tier, at $2 and $5 tier, you'll get a shout out when you sign up in the prequel episode, but $15 patrons, you'll always get a shout out. And this special $15 patron being they were also our first patron. Mm-hmm. So they get a special shout out in the main episode for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. That's it. So go check out our Patreon. If you just search for, I think it's patreon.com/thisfilmislit. I think if not, you can just search This Film is Lit and you'll find us. And that would be awesome. We would really, really appreciate it if you could support us because we're struggling millennials. We're working that hustle. And this is just another thing we do. So if you enjoy us and want to support us, that'd be amazing. Thank you. All right, Katie, we don't have Guess Who this week, but we do have Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
And you have a little summary of the book. I'm going to let you do that, and then I'm going to do a brief summary of the movie. But while you do the book, I'm going to close my ears so I don't get any spoilers for any of my questions. Go.
A grandfather tells his grandchildren the best bedtime story ever. A real tall tale about the island of Chew and Swallow, where no one ever buys groceries because food and drink rain down from the sky. Everything is great until one day the weather takes a turn for the worst, sending down random food combinations that gradually get larger and larger. Eventually, the citizens of Chew and Swallow are forced to abandon the town in search of somewhere safer, somewhere with grocery stores.
All right, that is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the short and illustrated children's book. I'm going to tell you what goes on in the movie. Spoilers abound. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but there probably will be a few spoilers. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is about a character named Flint something that I can't recall, who is a scientist. We first introduced him as a child. He wants to be a scientist. We get a montage of all of his failed experiments that he's done over the years. But eventually he does, as he grows up and becomes, I assume, like a teenager, early 20s maybe,
early 20s,
right around the college age, I would guess, based on kind of the relationship with the dad. He has a successful invention, which is this machine that turns water into food, but it kind of has some nonsense goes on with it. It ends up shooting into the sky, causing food to rain down on this small town that he lives on with his dad, called Swallow Falls, which is like a little island. And this ends up putting Swallow Falls on the map, and tourists are going to come and visit because of the raining food, and he's now become an important and respected and, VIP member of this society, or of this little town. He's become famous, and he's sort of eating it up. But ultimately the machine starts overloading, causing, because he's been using it too much and doing too much with the machine, the food starts all of a sudden kind of runs out of control. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, creating this giant maelstrom of food in the sky that's going to basically ultimately destroy the whole world by crushing it with food, I think, is the idea.
Yeah, I think that's the idea.
But initially, at least, it's going to destroy Swallow Falls, which is not great. Well, at this point, it's Chew and Swallow because they've changed the name. Because the sign gets replaced because they got food now. And then, food other than sardines. And then, so he has to figure out how to save the day. He teams up with a plucky weather reporter named Sam. And her news photographer, and the baby Brent, the mascot from the sardine company. And they go fly up in his ship to save the day. Some more nonsense ensues. Ultimately, they do save the day. Flint gets the girl, and the movie ends. That's pretty much it. All right. So there you go. That's what happens in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Now we're going to talk about some of the details and get into, was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
All right, so I have a handful of questions. We're probably going to bang through this pretty quick because I'm assuming most of this is probably not in the book from what you have said about the book. I'm going to go on a limb and say that a lot of this stuff is additions for the film, but we're going to go through it anyways. First off, Flint, the main character. Do we have a protagonist in this book, or are we just sort of, what's the deal? Is there a protagonist?
No, not really. The book's more of a concept. It's a frame story. The idea is that it's a grandpa telling his grandchildren a bedtime story about a town where food rains from the sky.
Does the grandpa have anything in common with Flint?
No.
Okay. All right, cool. Swallow Falls, the island town that is stuck eating nothing but sardines, is, I guess, one, is there this little island town that they live on, and two, does that island town eat nothing but sardines?
It is an island town, but it's chew and swallow from the get-go.
Okay.
And it rains food from the sky from the get-go.
Oh, spoilers for my later questions.
Oh, sorry.
All right. At least I assume that's spoilers. I think I asked it. Well, we'll see. So, okay, so the sardines thing, not a thing. Boy, all right. And this is kind of my follow-up eventually, once we start getting introduced to more characters like Sam Sparks, who is the weather person, Baby Brent, who is this mascot of the sardine company, and the mayor. Do we have any named characters that are persistent throughout this book?
No, we don't.
Okay. You know what's funny is that, so it sounds like this book doesn't have a story.
It does not.
It's funny because we were talking about in the prequel episode how the studio, that was their big notes for this film.
I know, and I thought that was really funny when you said that, because the book truly does not have a story.
The studio came down on them and they were like, you guys, this story's pretty weak. There's not enough of a story here. And they're like, yeah, read the book, probably. I mean, there's a story in this movie. I think, I don't know if, it's weird after watching it. I don't think I'd say that it doesn't That like I mean the narrative's not particularly interesting. Like it's not particularly like novel or like
right.
You know.
Yeah, it's
not a lot going on with it, I guess was the point. Like it's just sort of a traditional like, oh, here's this character who wants to become, you know, well known for a thing. Thing gets out of control. He has to stop thing. The end.
Pretty much.
Thing gets stopped. The end. Yeah. Does anybody in this book have permanent polymer spray-on shoes?
No.
Like Flint does in the movie? Because I thought that was a fun thing in the movie where he, as a child, he invents spray-on shoes, but then can never get them off and has them for the rest of his life.
Apparently they grow with him.
Yeah, apparently they do grow with him. But he has these rubber shoes on for his entire life.
No, that's not in the book.
Cool. You already answered it. So the food just naturally rains from the sky. Because my question was, in the movie, the reason the food starts raining from the sky is because this character's food creation machine goes haywire and launches up into the atmosphere and starts spewing out food. But that's not what happens in the book.
No, the book doesn't explain why it rains food.
Literally no explanation.
No, it just
rains food there. All right. In the movie, they deal with the leftovers on the ground because most of the people eat the food as it falls. But they deal with the leftovers by having this giant machine that like scoops the leftovers onto a plate and then catapults it into like a dump on the outskirts of the city that they've dammed up, which is terrible waste management. But it's part of the point. But because it comes back to haunt them eventually. But yeah. Is that happen in the book? Is there that machine?
There is a machine that looks similar.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
I thought I remember seeing an image, like in a social post or something.
I posted
okay, maybe that's why I thought to ask
media.
this, because I saw on social media that there was a post that looked like that machine exactly.
It is that machine, but it doesn't launch the food in the book. They don't just like launch it into a dump or a dam.
What do they do with the food? Or is that a later thing?
Yeah, I'm going to talk more about that later.
Put a pin in that one. Is there a Jell-O castle? Because in the movie, Flint creates a giant Jell-O mold castle for Sam because she says she likes Jell-O in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's pretty dope. Other than the weird part where they like would die because she jumps into the swimming pool. There's like a horrifying shot in that moment where he like belly flops. And he like, oh, why'd I do that? And then we cut to an under the Jell-O, like under the pool shot, and she's in a cannonball stuck like 10 feet deep in the Jell-O. And I'm like, oh no. Oh no, you're just gonna die down there.
Just gonna suffocate.
This is like horrifying. And then they just cut away. I mean, I know it's whatever. She just swims out or whatever. But I was like, oh. Anyways.
There is a picture in the book with a giant Jell-O, but nobody goes inside it. Okay. So it's not a castle.
But inspired potentially by seeing the giant Jell-O. It is funny though, because I remember seeing a video about what would happen if you made a giant pool out of Jell-O. Mm-hmm. Some guy on YouTube did it.
I think I watched that one too.
I can't remember his name. He's a guy who was a former he worked for like JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He's like a NASA guy who has like a YouTube channel. He's like an engineer. He has like a YouTube channel where he does engineering stuff now. And one of the videos he did, he filled a pool full of Jell-O, and you can't really swim in it.
Oh,
particularly.
that's disappointing.
Because it's either, if you get it thick enough, I don't remember. It's been a while since I watched it, but go watch. I think his name's like Mark something. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, right, because it's not really a liquid. It's a very soft solid.
Yeah, and if you get it to the point, then it's just kind of like a big cherry flavored or whatever flavored like pool with like gooey bits in it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what happened. Anyways, it's an interesting video. If you go Google like Jell-O pool, but like there's probably a bunch of terrible like clickbait nonsense, but there's one guy, his name's Mark something, who's like an engineer who did it, and it was interesting. Go watch that one. In the movie, the food the problem becomes that the food just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it's going to starts crushing things and accumulating in the sky and accumulating in the dump, and it's going to swallow up the whole town, and they have to figure out a way to stop it. Is there runaway giant food in the movie book?
There is runaway giant food in the book. That's kind of where I hesitate to call it a story because, again, it's not really a story.
Right.
But that is kind of where the concept of the town of Chew and Swallow comes to a crest in the book, is that the food gets so big that it's causing a lot of damage. So obviously it's unsafe to live there at a certain point.
Okay. Does the book have any sort of themes going on? And we'll get to this, I guess, ultimately, like in the later, like better in the book, better in the movie, and the final verdict of like what's better in each, and what the movie added and that sort of thing, and what you prefer and why. But are there any sort of interesting themes going on in the book? The one I specifically wrote down is that the movie has a couple pretty obvious themes about one seeking like popularity and the approval of others, which is Flint's whole deal is he wants to create something, not just to create something, but so that people like respect him and like him, and you know he's seeking that fame, which is one of the big themes kind of that the movie touches on. And then another one is the sort of theme of moderation, because like they all love the food at first and it's fun, but then like it keeps they love it so much and they want more and more and more that it like spirals out of control and starts crushing their houses and stuff.
Yeah.
Particularly the mayor, but everybody, like pretty much everybody. Any sort of themes or interesting things going on in the book?
I would say no. The book is pretty short on themes. It's fun.
Yeah.
If it had a theme, maybe like imagination. I don't know if I'd even call that a theme.
Right. That's more of just like an element, but okay. So yeah, so no, it's not really coming out to it's not a children's story like a Dr. Seuss or something.
No, it's
coming
out
to like
coming
teach you
at
a
us
lesson
with some kind of lesson.
Okay. Is there a spaghetti and meatballs tornado? Because that was really cool in the movie when there was a giant tornado of spaghetti and meatballs. That was dope.
Kind of. There's a tomato tornado, and the illustration has like a definite Italian food vibe. But it wasn't a spaghetti tornado the way that it was in the movie.
Gotcha. That scene, a lot of these scenes made me want whatever food it was, but that scene in particular really made me want spaghetti and meatballs. The burger scene in the first part did too, but the spaghetti and meatball scene, I was like, man.
Yeah.
I want a tornado of spaghetti and meatballs just to destroy my house. And I'll eat my way out of the wreckage. Is the ending of this movie similar at all to what happens in the book? So we talked about it, but in the end of I talked about it in the Let Me Sum Up. But at the end of this movie, everything kind of spirals out of control. The food is going to destroy the town and eventually the world, and Flint has to save the day. While meanwhile, some of the village, like the people from the town, kind of make boats out of the food and then sail away to like evacuate the town. And then eventually go somewhere else, I guess. I don't remember what they do.
I don't think they actually leave.
Do they come back? The town got crushed.
I think they just come right
I think you're right, though.
Back after.
I don't know why I can't remember what happens.
Because they show all of the boats still, like, there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they go out, but I thought they're... Anyways, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But is any of that similar to what happens in the book?
The biggest similarity is everyone constructing boats out of the giant food, like out of the giant slices of bread, and then sailing away from the island. Other than that, not really.
Because they have no, so basically they have no way to, they don't come up with a way to like solve this problem or do anything about it. It's just, they're like, well, guess we can't live here anymore.
Pretty much. I mean, because in the book, they didn't cause it to start raining food.
Right.
So there's not really anything that they can do about it. It's just kind of like, well, I guess this is what it's going to do now. So I guess we have to leave.
Fair enough. Okay. And that's what kind of, like you said, from what we've discussed up to this point about what happens in the book, and there not being a main character or really much of a narrative, and it's just sort of like a documentation of this strange occurrence on this small tiny island that the grandpa is relaying as a fun story. Okay, cool. That's like I said, that's what I figured. That's all I got for was that in the book, and I don't have Lost in Adaptation because there's nothing. I mean, the only thing that I would have been was, and I already asked it, which was there an explanation for why the food fell out of the sky if it wasn't what it is in the movie? And it wasn't what it is in the movie, but there isn't one. It's magic. Maybe there is in the later books, because we talked about there are a couple sequels to this. Maybe they address, because I wonder I would be interested to see what happens in the sequels and if they do anything more narratively or in terms of the explanation for why any of this is going on, or just even what the sequels are. Like, is it just...
One of the sequels was called Pies Over Pittsburgh, I think.
Oh, so it's spreading.
Yeah, so maybe it spreads in the sequel.
And then maybe they have to come up with a solution for it. Maybe it turns into a global warming metaphor come the later books. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting.
Because this one was written, I want to say, 1978.
Yeah.
And then the sequels to it were much, much later.
One of them was way later. One of them I thought was...
They were like 2000 and 2013.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, yeah. Which were both well post. 78, we're still right. I mean, we knew about climate change, but not in the way that most people were writing books about it, like popular fiction about it. Whereas 2000 and 2013, for sure, people were we were well aware. And so that would be interesting.
And
to
I
see
mean, even if I wouldn't call this any kind of commentary on climate change like this one, because there's no indication that the change in weather has anything to do with people.
Right.
It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying in this one.
Yeah.
And then, but maybe, like I said,
maybe in
they looked back and go, this could be an interesting direction to take it. You know, when they come back and look at it in the year 2000, you know, from that lens and go, hey, we have an opportunity here to kind of take this and do something interesting with it. Turns out, actually, you know, kind of like a Godzilla type story where like something to do with that's problematic because it's usually those kind of stories have to do with like nuclear radiation and stuff, which is sort of gets weird because nuclear is not the boogeyman that a lot of people make it out to be. But whatever it is, they could have come up with an interesting way to maybe turn it into something like that.
I don't know. I'll have to see if I can get my hands on the two sequels to this.
Yeah, I would just be interested to see where it goes.
Happens,
It would be real quick and easy follow-up. Maybe we'll do that in bonus content for our patrons. All right, let's we got some. This is going to be a shorter episode because we don't have very long segments, partially because it is a children's picture book. And partially because the movie was just okay, in my opinion. It was fine. It was fine. I didn't have a lot of strong feelings about it. I had like fun, but we'll talk about it. We'll get to it. But we have better in the book. Let's do that.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
The book really is just a concept, and I say that a lot when we do picture books.
Right, yeah.
But like the book is a concept, and then the movie has to kind of take that and run with it and put a story to it.
For sure, yeah.
So my segments tend to be a little bit shorter because I could make a list of every single thing that's different, right? But that feels pointless.
And that's what I try to avoid that too, in terms of like, was that in the book? Because it's like, well, was this one particular image in the book? Was this one particular? Because that's to me not interesting. It can be interesting if it's something iconic, like the spaghetti tornado is like this big cool thing. Wanted to ask about that. You know, that kind of stuff I'll ask about, but like specific little details, it's like, oh, well, go through everything that fell out of sky in the movie. Did each of these items fall out of the sky in the book? Like, nobody cares. Like, that's not.
We're not going to make you guys listen to that.
No, that's boring. So yeah, I think the same thing in terms of this. Like, what you like better? It's like, oh well, I liked this one page where this one drawing had this and that wasn't in the movie. It's like, well, maybe. I mean, it could be something interesting. Well, anyways, I'll let you go. But
so I have a couple things for better in the book. One thing that I want to talk about is the illustrations, just like in general, because I really enjoy the art style of this book. I always have. And the movie, I thought there was some cool imagery.
I thought there were some stunning tableaus, for lack of a better word. There's a couple really cool moments where, in particular, the big wide shots where the camera pulls back and we see like Flint standing in a corner, and then it's like this giant, like I think the tornado, the spaghetti tornado does that. I think the first shot where the clouds are rolling in after and the hamburgers are starting to fall. There's a handful of moments like that where these really cool wide vistas of like crazy color and like spiraling clouds and food that look really neat, and like when the ice cream ends up there's moments like that, but then there's other moments where like the character animations aren't particularly
the animation
interesting.
Style I don't think is particularly interesting.
It feels a little like they blew the budget on those like big like which makes sense for this movie, like they blew the budget on these big set pieces where where this is big, like at the end of the movie where there's the big thing of food and there's all this like lightning and nonsense going on, but then so they're like couldn't spend as much time animating or coming up with a particularly like interesting or like detailed character models and stuff like that. They're just kind of like fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really love the illustrations in the book. I talked about it a little bit in the prequel. It kind of reminds me almost of like a comic book.
Yeah.
Or like reading the Sunday comics.
Yeah.
Where it's a lot of it is like ink lines and then there's color behind it.
Yeah.
And I really like the pages where it shifts from where the grandpa's telling the story and then it shifts into the town of Chew and Swallow.
Yeah.
And then back out again to the grandpa and the grandkids at the end. The way that it blends, I think, is really well done and creative.
That's cool. Maybe you can post an example of that. Just like,
yeah,
is there like
I'll
a
post some pictures.
Spread you could show on social
for sure.
media? Cool.
So the movie adds an explanation for why there is weather food, which I like and I get. But I also like the idea that this place has just like existed for a long time. So we would assume, and like people have lived there and it was totally normal and fine. Like they just lived in this place where food rains down from the sky for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an interesting, like I think the idea of like the rocket that shoots up into the clouds and then it makes it rains food. I think that's interesting, but I think the idea that this is just a place that exists is equally interesting.
Yeah, it's also interesting. I think the movie tries to kind of do both by having the town be a place that exists that literally only has sardines as like the weird, and that's the thing that people just deal with, and that's like just their life, and they're like, whatever, we just only eat sardines or whatever, which is kind of interesting, you know, in like that surreal like it reminded me of something out of like Lemony Snicket or something, where they like go to a village.
It's very Lemony Snicket.
Right, where
all
like,
we eat here is sardines.
And
and everything's gray.
Yeah.
So I get the commentary and the stakes of having them just like fling the leftovers away and it all piles up behind this dam. And I like that. I like that as a thematic element. But I also like what happens in the book, which is that they gather everything up and they feed all of the animals in the town. And then some of it they put into the ocean and they feed like the fish and the whales and things. And then the rest of it they put back into the ground and like fertilize people's gardens and whatnot.
Why do they have gardens?
It's
I guess
very
for
wholesome.
Flowers.
Yeah.
It is wholesome.
They have flowers.
Yeah, that is wholesome. And it is a very, you know, it's what you would do if you were living in this place where food fell from the sky. Although, why would you need I guess... Why would you need farm animals if you have?
Well, the pictures are cats and dogs.
Oh, okay.
To be fair,
okay. I thought you were just.
But I guess if you don't, I mean, why not have? We could just have farm animals as like pets.
You could have them as pets.
Fun.
I guess that's fair.
I've heard that cows are really sweet.
That could be the case. That could be. I mean, I know. I also have heard that, but you could be right that maybe they just have them as pets. And like, if you have food falling from the sky, it seems wild. I mean, it's already unethical to eat animals, probably.
Yeah, I mean, why would you if all your food falls from the sky?
Why would you go about the whole ordeal of like butchering animals when it's just like, oh, a steak just fell out of the sky, cool, great. Like if my steaks fell from the sky, I would be super thrilled because I mean, ethically, vegans, you guys are probably right, but you know, I'm lazy and bad. I'm a bad person, so that's that. That was it for Better in the Book.
That was it. I mean, I just really like the concept of this, and like the idea that this town, prior to everything turning huge and like smashing things, had to have been like a utopia.
Yeah, the greatest place.
Yeah, like I mean, and what do you need money for?
You don't.
You don't.
They were living in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah.
They're living gay space communism, where it's just. There is no money. Food. They have replicators. They basically have a replicator. It's just the sky just drops food on them. So yeah, they're
and then they were like really responsible and wholesome about it.
They were part of the Federation. The Federation would have landed and would have been like, "You guys, you're crushing it. We're out of here." Well, they wouldn't have landed because the Prime Directive, but they would have been studying them and they would have been like, "You guys, good job. We're out of here. Keep eating your sky food." All right, let's move on to Better in the Movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
All right, so I have a couple things that I want to talk about here. Similar to the last segment, some kind of bigger general stuff. A story is a thing that the movie has.
Yeah.
The book is incredibly charming, but it is just a concept. The movie explains, i.e. science babbles, why it rains food. There's character development. Kind of.
We'll talk about
which
it.
Which is, there's at least an attempt, which is cool.
Yeah. No, there is. There is character development. It's just in some ways more than others. Yeah.
And I liked the thematic elements that the movie added as well. I liked the commentary on greed and like making more and more despite the consequences.
Yeah.
And I liked the father-son dynamic that was going on in the movie. I thought that was cute.
I thought that was well done. I think that the movie did a good job with the father-son dynamic of striking a good balance of both of them needing to... It wasn't just like one person was right.
Yeah, they needed to meet in the middle.
Yeah, and which is not that like that's super uncommon, but still thought it was pretty well done.
I liked that they changed the tomato tornado to a spaghetti tornado. As much as I like the tongue twister of tomato tornado. Spaghetti tornado was a cool visual.
Yeah.
And it made a lot of sense for like what a tornado is. And
yeah.
Because it makes me think of like twirling spaghetti like on your fork.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense.
I also loved the rat birds.
Rat birds. They're pretty cool.
Gotta love that.
All right. That was basically all we had for Better in the Movie. Let's move on and talk about what the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
So what the movie nails is basically a list of like specific imagery that is also in the book, a lot of which I was pretty happy to see make its way into the movie. I thought it was cool. Pretty early on, like right after it starts raining food in the movie, there's an old guy with glasses and a mustache watching the weather report on the TV and holding an umbrella and a fork and a plate. Yeah. That is an illustration from the book.
And then and then in the movie, he puts his umbrella down.
Yeah.
Unless this is a different guy, but I think it's the same guy. He puts his umbrella down and just puts his plate on his head.
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny.
Pancake falling on the kid's face.
Yeah, I called that one out.
Yeah,
because I saw that on
happens.
the social media post. Is the kid looking like he got scalded by the... Yeah. But he's got his face... Or a couple kids get pancakes in the face in the movie, but one of them has his face out of the window of a car, and it made me chuckle.
We talked about the cleanup truck with the giant fork and spoon and the plate.
Looked exactly
it looks exactly like it does in the book.
Yeah.
The giant Jell-O... in the book, it's like a Jell-O sunset. In the movie, I think it might have been sunrise.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But there's a similar, there's a similar image where like it looks like it's rising up over the horizon. The restaurant with no roof.
I was not going to ask about that, and then I forgot.
The restaurant with no roof is from the book. The giant pancake covering the school, which I also posted on our social media.
I thought that was from the book.
There's an image of donuts rolling down the street.
Yeah.
In both the book and the movie. And then at the end when they escape on the boats I think are like bit for bit. Like they're made out of giant pieces of bread and then the sails are like
bacon,
peas,
peas.
Cheese and pizza.
Yeah.
I tried to combine them.
That's a terrible sail. I don't know how you make a sail out of peas.
I mean, I don't know that cheese and pizza would be any better.
Cheese is a much better sail than peas.
If we're using Swiss, though.
Why would you use Swiss?
They were using Swiss,
yeah. That is what they use in the movie.
It's got holes in it. Come on, guys.
Yeah, that's a terrible idea. So in that regard, maybe not a lot better. But.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, since what the movie nailed was basically like specific images. Yeah. I'm going to try to post some side-by-sides at some point.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
I'm thinking I might have to scrub back through the movie.
Yeah, it's on Netflix,
to take pictures.
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that.
Because I tried to like Google it and I could only find a couple of the specific screenshots.
Yeah, we can go through it and get them.
So be on the lookout for that. And I'll do some side-by-sides for you guys.
Perfect. So that was it for the movie Nailed It. We've got a few odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
So one of my main issues with the movie was that I felt like it had some pacing issues.
It's a real breakneck speed.
Yeah.
Like
that first 30, 40 minutes, boy, we really scooted through the setup and the setup to the setup for this story. I
appreciate them keeping it an hour 30, but it could have been an hour 45. Yeah. And still been a reasonable kids movie length, and it felt like it could have maybe gave us a little more time to get going. Mm-hmm. And I have a thing later on that I felt like that was sort of just wrapped up very quickly and succinctly at the end, which we'll get to here in a minute. But yeah, I thought the same thing. The pacing was a little not ideal. It was a
little all over the place. I think I asked you at one point, I was like, how far are we into this? Because I feel like we've already covered a lot of ground. Yeah. And we were only 30 minutes in.
Yeah. A lot happens very quickly, which can be fine. And I think it works okay, but they definitely could have slowed it down just a little bit. Yeah. I feel like it would have
could have given a little space to breathe.
Yeah, definitely would have helped, I think. Let's talk about some of the, because we both have a lot of several notes about this, and I think this might as good a place as any to talk about it, which is the Sam Sparks' character, who the female news reporter or a weather anchor or whatever. She's introduced by the male news guy at the station, going, she's pretty and perky. Or she's cute and perky, and that's all a weather girl needs to be, or something like that. And then we find out over the course of time over the course of the movie, that she's actually much smarter than she lets on, and that she sort of plays dumber than she is to kind of fit in and that sort of thing. And one of the big moments that we both have a note on is that, so she shows up to cover this story. They basically just send her down there to cover the food. Well, to cover
initially it's the sardine park.
The sardine park that they're building, but then it turns into the food coverage story, and she stays and just keeps covering it. And so her and Flint sort of end up talking, and then kind of getting in, forming a friendship or bond or whatever. There's a moment in the Jello Castle where she has glasses, and she pulls them out and says, oh, I need these, I can't see anything. And then he puts them on her, and then he makes her a
Jello scrunchie, which makes no sense.
Gross, and weird, but and he puts her hair up, and then he's like, oh, perfect, you're beautiful. And so we talked about this trope, which this is a trope in, not this, but the trope in movies of the cute girl.
It's a rom-com trope.
The cute girl who doesn't realize she's cute, who has her hair up and big glasses and, paint on her face or whatever. And then she cleans herself up, puts her hair down, takes her glasses off, and now, wow, she's beautiful.
She's hot. She's a hot girl now.
And so that's a problematic trope, and it's a big trope in movies. And then this one does the reverse. And now we talked by having, to put her hair up, or
right, she puts on her glasses, puts her hair up in a ponytail.
And then the guy's like, wow, you're gorgeous. My problem with it, so Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark did this exact thing.
Yes.
But they did it so much better. That was one of my favorite moments in that movie. I thought it felt so much better because she didn't, so she started with the glasses. Mm-hmm. I think that's the big difference, is that in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, that character started with the glasses and stuff, and then she takes them off herself. And then and then the guy gives her back her glasses at the end, and she puts them back on.
Right. Well, I think what helped in Scary Stories too was that it wasn't tied up in the idea of her needing to look a certain way.
That's the thing, I think. So this one, and this one feels gross to me because Flint gives her permission to wear the glasses and put her hair up, and he's like, now you're really gorgeous. Before, and it's just this weird thing where it feels like they were trying to subvert that trope in a way that was empowering, or is what it felt like. It felt like, and this movie was written by two dudes, but it very clearly felt like a scene written by two dudes trying to be like, look, girls, you're pretty with glasses. Because there's a way to do that's not weird.
Yeah. Well, and it is, technically it is a subversion of the trope. Technically. but it's a really, really basic subversion of it.
Right.
Like, there's zero thought behind this.
Right.
It's like, oh, the trope is she takes her glasses off. We'll have her put her glasses on.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
aren't we clever?
Yeah.
And then the other problem is that it's coming from her love interest.
Her male love interest. Yeah, and it's
who at that time, I want to add, is very clearly interested in her, but we don't know yet how she feels about him.
No, their whole relationship's problematic. I didn't like their whole relationship felt like it was written in the early 2000s. And now this is like 2008 or 2009. Although they started making this movie in like 2003, so who knows what aspects of that. But it felt like a very like that time period where it was just. Yeah, it just felt gross, and it felt there's like I said, he basically Flint like gives her permission to put these glasses on, and all these other men have told her she's got to look a certain way, but he sees her beautiful in this other way. But like he gives her permission to be like less conventionally attractive, and I feel like there's baggage that's there, and I think. And I was hoping they were going to do something with it. Like maybe it was going to go somewhere. And it almost does. Oh, boy. There's so many layers to this. Like, I know what they were going for. But I think what they were going for was a very 2007 and like male written way of like female empowerment of like, oh, you don't have to be the beautiful, gorgeous women that men demand you to be. You don't have to pretend to be dumb. But... she can also like I would have liked but it also feels like they did that by having a guy tell her that as opposed to her realizing that is what the weird like gross part of it is. So like that doesn't feel any more empowering. It's just a different guy telling her how to be basically. Yeah. So it's like, okay.
There's not really a difference there.
No, there's not a difference there.
And they thought they made a difference.
That's the thing. And that's what feels even weirder and grosser about it is they felt like they made a difference. And now it feels like they've come a long way in their writing and their thinking since then because I got none of those vibes really from Into the Spider-Verse, which they wrote. And they don't really go into it's a little bit different. But their relationship between... Miles and what's her name? Gwen felt a lot better in Into the Spider-Verse than this one did. And I think the other thing too is that it also sort of unconsciously reinforces the idea that you can't both be smart and attractive. Yeah. Not to say that she isn't attractive with the glasses, but like that there's some sort of like you have to fit into one of these molds. Like you can only be like conventionally attractive and dumb or like
you can wear glasses
or you can wear glasses and be smart. Like you can't like be conventionally attractive and be smart or what, you know what I mean? Like it just feels like this weird like shoehorning no matter like putting women into this weird mold no matter how you do it, whereas it's just like let her decide how smart she is and or not how smart she is, but you know what she wants to look like. And I was really hoping that we'd get to the end of the movie and she would go, I actually prefer not wearing glasses. Yeah. Or something like that. You know what I mean? Like he's like puts them on her and she's like, oh, and then like maybe it's a give and a take in that regard to where like he kind of opens her up to the idea that you don't have to pretend to be dumb or whatever. Like that's, but then she goes, yeah, but I prefer like my hair down and to now or something, just so it felt like she had more agency like than she seems to. Because, and that's where I was hoping we would get more of later in the movie, which we don't get a ton of, is she calls him out a couple times because Flint is like the epitome of the adorable misogynist in this movie. Yeah. Which there's a great video, I think it's Pop Culture Detective, I can't remember who it is, who did a video about Big Bang Theory, about that trope. And he kind of fits right into it with his like leaning in for kisses at awkward moment. Oh, look how dorky, he doesn't know when to, and the whole thing with the glasses, like just sort of everything about his character, and he lying to her about he lies to her. One of the running storylines, and it becomes a thing later, is he lies to her. She says she has a peanut allergy, and he says I do too, to have something in common with her, to try to impress her because he wants to get into a relationship with her. And at the end of the movie, and this is what was really disappointing to me, they come to a place that in this big maelstrom of food or whatever that has like peanut brittle. And she's like, well, neither of us can go down there because of where our peanut allergies. And he goes, well, actually, I lied. And she immediately is fine with it. Yeah. she's like, hey, she says something. She calls him out a little.
Like, I feel like the harshest she gets, she says, like, did you really think that was gonna make me like you or something like that?
Yeah, that's what it is. She goes, did you think that was gonna make me like you? And then he goes, oh, I don't know. And then he goes down in the hole, and then he confesses his like for her. He says he likes her, and she immediately is like, yeah, I like you too. And it just feels like there's no like repercussions for the moment of him having lied to her about this thing. She's just like, oh, that was gross. And the other moment that I thought was weird is that there's the moment where he says ladies first when they're like jumping out of the flying car or whatever. And she gives him a look like, and again, it's one of those moments that the writers felt like, nice, girl power. But then like there's no commentary. She doesn't call him out. She gives him a look, but it's all very subtle and like and I'm like, okay, so if your goal was to do this like subtle critique of like this misogyny thing he's got going on, why be so subtle about it in this kids movie when everything else is so overt? Like the whole father-son relationship is literally the dad at the end gets a brain translator on that expresses exactly what his feelings are and why he has such a hard time connecting with his son. But then we're gonna like do this vague, limp-wristed critique of...
You know why. Yeah,
no, I know exactly why. I'm just saying that was like very disappointing, and it was detracted from the movie for me just because it just felt so wishy-washy, and like it's the same thing it's what you said earlier, where it's like you can see they're trying to be like vaguely progressive, but also like
I think they wanted the cookie for doing that,
right?
But they didn't necessarily want to put the work into developing that element of the story.
Right. I think, I think it's that. And I also think it's, like I said, I think it's like, well, they would, if you asked them that in the moment, they would go, well, we don't like when a movie gets super preachy and comes out. And if, like, it would have felt weird for her to come out and be like, dude, you're being an asshole. Or, dude, you know, like if she came out and called out his like weird sort of innate unconscious misogyny that he's got going on over the course of this movie. If she came out and called it out, that would feel like preachy and weird. And it's like, okay, sure, maybe. Like, you can do stuff subtly and do it well. But in this movie, the metaphor for greed is giant food just continuously falling out of the sky and getting bigger and bigger, and a mayor growing to 800 pounds and then eating the ship he's on. And then literally the father-son relationship message that you're selling is, like I said, the dad having his mind read by a machine and just expressing exactly what his feelings and why he feels the way he does. Nothing else is subtle in this movie. Why would that be the thing that's subtle? Yeah, it's yeah. Anyways, that was not. Anyway.
And if I may harp on a smaller point for a moment, girl, just get you some contacts.
True. We know they exist in this universe. We know they exist
in this universe, which is why it bothers me. If we didn't have that other very explicit contact lens scene, that wouldn't bother me. Yeah. But we do, so it does.
I am wondering if, because of that, if maybe there's something cut out of the movie. Like, maybe she does just get contacts eventually later or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Or, who knows? I don't know. Because it is such a specific reference, because Mr. T, policeman, is like, contact lens! And then... she just is blind.
Yeah, she just walks around without her glasses on, not able to see.
Yeah, and she's not stupid. That's the thing. It's like she's not a dummy.
Yeah.
Like
she knows contacts exist.
She could probably make her own contact lenses based on what we hear her say in this movie. Yeah.
Maybe she doesn't have health care.
Yeah. That very likely. Oh, working as a... she's an intern, so no, she doesn't.
Yeah, she probably doesn't have vision coverage.
They say she's the intern, so... Well, if she has health insurance, she'd have... Vision is very cheap add-on to the health insurance. The insurance itself is the hard part. The TV looting a person made me laugh. There's a moment later where, when stuff starts to go crazy, a guy the window of a TV store breaks, and a guy runs up and pulls a TV out and runs away. And then they set up earlier that one of Flint's inventions when he was a child was a remote control TV that you turn it on, you use the remote, and then it sprouts legs and walks over to you so you can change the channel. Yeah. And then it just runs out the door and we never see it again. But then at this moment, like way later in the movie, it runs into the store and pulls the clerk out and runs out, which was very hilarious to me, and I was not prepared for it, and I laughed a lot at it. That moment was delightful.
I was a little disappointed, though, that they missed the obvious trope of having a cow swirling around in their spaghetti tornado.
They could not, Katie, have had a cow because they only had sardines in this town. Where would if they had cows, they would have been eating steaks and burgers before this.
I'm going to call shenanigans on that concept, though, because we know they have coffee.
Do we?
Because he takes a coffee break.
True. Oh, you're right.
Plot holes.
Also,
concept
he knows
holes.
what a burger is. I guess they would know what those things are because I think the concept was that, at least for some of that, was that this island that they live on is so remote that they can't get stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do. He does have coffee.
He does have coffee.
Maybe they can grow coffee and they have sardines and that's it.
Coffee and sardines.
Coffee and sardines is the only things they have. You know, if I had seen this movie and I didn't, and I had known that this was Phil Lord and Chris Miller, did I do that right? Christopher Miller, that wrote it and directed it, I would have been way less surprised by the visual style and the things that go on in... I'm actually glad I didn't, because Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse probably may not have impressed me as much. Mm-hmm. Now, they weren't directing that they did write it, or at least one of them wrote it, and they were producers on it, so they were involved in a lot of the creative process.
Well, they're both Sony.
Yeah, and they're both Sony, so I'm sure a lot of the same people worked on them.
Yeah.
But the visual climax of both of these movies had similarities that reminded me a lot of each other. Mm-hmm. The like pink swirling.
Yeah.
Like when they get into the, what is it? Whatever the machine, the particle accelerator or whatever in Into the Spider-Verse where everything's going crazy. It reminded me of like the moment when they're flying up to the big meatball thing. Mm-hmm. And there's like all these, like I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, that makes
very
sense.
Visually similar kind of thing. And there's also a sequence where Flint is running down the street and like jumping over cars and stuff and like bouncing off stuff, and it's the tornado sequence. And then he like ends up catching a thing as it flies by and flying away on the tornado. And it reminded me of a sequence straight out of like I was like, oh, if you just like gave him spider webs while he was doing this, you're like watching Spider-Man right now.
I thought there was some pretty gross imagery inside the food cloud meatball.
Particularly disgusting food things going on.
Particularly disgusting like movement.
Oh yeah, lots of pulsating.
Yeah.
And undulating.
Yeah.
Very gross.
Very gross.
Intentionally so, obviously, but very disgusting. Effective in that regard. Like I said, it's so funny how in contrast some of the visuals are in terms of like how effective some of that stuff is and some of the food like landscapes, for lack of a better word, versus like some of the more generic, like mundane like characters and stuff. All right, that was it for our general discussion, our odds and ends. Katie's about to hit us with the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterwards.
So this is a tough one. The book is one of my childhood favorites. I love the art style. I love the sheer imaginative concepts that the book brings to the table. On the other hand, as far as story goes, the movie obviously has more going on.
Has a story.
Yeah. On the other hand, I had a couple issues with the movie. I thought the pacing was off. I thought that it was maybe trying to do like too little, but also, or like too much, but also like not enough at once. Like I felt like there was a lot going on, but also like maybe not enough.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of chaos going on, but also it's a pretty bare bones narrative. Like, it's interesting.
And I also thought there were some definite problematic elements vis-a-vis the portrayal of Sam and her relationship with Flint. I think this time I'm going to give it to the book.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to give it to the book because the concepts are so similar that I kind of prefer the idea of being able to like impose your own story onto that concept.
Yeah.
And I mean, we did it just sitting here.
Yeah.
Started talking about like, what if this was a planet in Star Trek?
Yeah, you're right.
Like, so I think
you're right.
I think the movie definitely has its categories where it would supersede the book.
Yeah. It's funnier, probably. Or
it's funnier. It's got more thematic elements. It's got a story to it. But I think for me, for this time, I'm going to go ahead and give it to the book on the basis of concept and being able to, like, apply your own story to that concept.
Fantastic. I think that's a delightful and absolutely valid decision. Seems fine. Because, like I said, I thought the movie was just okay. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode of This Film Is Lit. Before we announce what our next thing's going to be, which Katie has notes for and is going to tell you about in just a second, we could do us a big, huge favor. A couple things. You could rate us and review us on iTunes or wherever you listen to our podcast that has ratings and reviews, primarily iTunes. You could follow us on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, and Reddit. I believe that's all. And most recently, you can support us on Patreon. Like I said at the beginning, just go to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us at any of the levels would be outstanding, but the $5 level gets you bonus content, which includes, like I said, our discussion of The Mandalorian, our discussion of Dollface, will include our discussion of Knives Out, and the rest of The Mandalorian, and the rest of Dollface. And much more to come after that. So if you could do that for us, that would be just incredible, and we would love you forever for it. Katie, what's next?
Up next, we are starting our holiday extravaganza. And we are going to be talking about Die Hard.
Yeah. We were going to do this last year, and then we
switched it at the last minute for something else.
Yeah. Sweet. Die Hard, which is based on a book, which nobody knows, and is kind of a Christmas movie.
I was actually thinking maybe for the prequel, we could present the major arguments for and against it being a Christmas movie.
We could rehash that old canard and see which side we come down on. I come down on the side of I don't care.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, you've never seen it. That's
so
true.
Then we could revisit that in the main episode.
See what you think.
See what I think about it.
I'm very staunchly in the side of sure it's a Christmas movie, but not really. Which is not really. I'm solidly in the not taking a stand side of this argument. Same in my GIF GIF. That whole spiel. I'm on like, yep, both are fine. Cool. But anyways, so Die Hard, that's going to be the next one. Come back for our prequel episode in 1 week where we will maybe break down whether or not it's a Christmas movie. You already know my opinion. And then in 2 weeks, we'll break down Die Hard, the film, and the novel it's based on. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else,
keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.